Welcome to the Philosopher's Compass podcast. I am your host, Meredith Alexander Kunz, and I really appreciate you joining me for this episode where my guest is Kasey Pierce, a writer and editor from the Metro Detroit area. I've been following her work, and she's the co-author of the Stoicism Workbook, How the Wisdom of Socrates Can Help You Build Resilience and Overcome Anything Life Throws at You, and the forthcoming The Rescuer Trap, a guide to overcoming codependency, compulsive helping in relationships, and people pleasing, which I'm very excited about. She's also editor of Tim LeBon's 365 Ways to Be More Stoic. I was one of the ways, so I appreciate her work on that.
Yes,
One of
I
the
remember
days.
that. Yes.
That was very special for me to be included. And she's passionate about broadening Stoicism's appeal through modern CBT practices. And these are things that touch me personally. So I love everything that you're working on, Kasey, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
I wanted to start with just asking you, how did you get interested in philosophy and in Stoicism in particular?
So I had read the Meditations when I was in college, but it didn't quite land or really mean too much to me at the time until I learned about CBT, which is, of course, cognitive behavioral therapy. And then when I listened to How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, it really made a lot of sense to me. And I would say that I was halfway to being a Stoic at the time. I was always on the quest for wisdom. I have a lot of self-help books, which I laugh because my husband often says that that's a red flag about someone.
I have a lot of them too, so flags everywhere.
Right. I always say I have so many Hay House books. It's embarrassing. Like he doesn't even care to be looped into that genre. But if it's tools for life, it's tools for life. With philosophy, it's more about the lens we wear. It becomes how we
Mhm.
approach life in general. So it isn't a list of hacks. It does come with tools, though, much like self-help. So anyway, I say I was halfway to being a Stoic in that I was practicing things like premeditatio malorum all my life, the cognitive rehearsal to diffuse major life decisions of their anxiety. But I was also a black and white thinker.
Mm.
And it made decisions easier for me, but it made me a little more militant about things and less compassionate. So I knew how to cut and run. That's an easy mental shortcut, but there isn't much balance in that, nor does it really do anything to shape your character. In fact, it's actually pretty self-destructive and, it can possibly hurt others around you.
Well, that's really interesting. Could you say a little bit more about that? Why is it self-destructive?
It's self-destructive in that it doesn't um it's not shaping your lens at all. In fact, it's sort
Mm.
of um, making this view of the world that, it's all down to me, it's everybody else. And it's always you versus the world.
Mm. Yeah.
Whereas if you are making more calculated decisions, it challenges your thinking. And it challenges this idea that you can be less than compassionate when you got to get to the next place when you got to quit
Mm-hmm.
that job, when you got to leave that relationship. Um, and, uh, that it's destructive in the sense that you start to become someone else. You start to become a little bit more callous and you don't want to be that person. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't realize that it's even happening, but the lens becomes distorted in that, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
it's the world versus you. And if it's the world versus you, the world wins every time. Doesn't matter. You've already lost.
Mm. That's really interesting. I think of it as also kind of the victim mentality that pops up, which
Yes.
I've, kind of thought about a lot, been exposed to, been felt myself. And that's one thing I've written about in my blog over the years, that it's just not a good way to live. Unfortunately, we're kind of surrounded by it, especially in American society today.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
even at the highest levels, it's like, and I feel that that's become just like a cultural narrative, which is very just, I think, bad for our character.
Yeah.
So yeah, so maybe back to Stoicism, like how can it help, and how have you used it in your own life to maybe try to make a dent in some of these areas that can be really challenging?
In conjunction with premeditatio malorum, which is still always a fave for me, but I do believe if you're going to build intrinsic worth and approach life in the most efficient way possible, I've always been a fan of adopting a sage. I would say I'm a business major, and I think it really works well in terms of leadership, although I don't like that term leadership. Not anymore. It has become such a buzz term, and suddenly everyone's out there selling their expertise in leadership. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything anymore. Anyway, that's a whole conversation for another time. But if we believe as the person we believe in, and then in turn we can believe in ourselves, modeling the traits we find admirable in other people isn't acting. It's a practice to become the person we want to be, and it eventually leads us to becoming that and leading a more fulfilling life. And that is what paves the way to a more fulfilling life. It's not an easy life. It's not a hard life. The goal is a fulfilling one. At the
Mm-hmm.
end of the
How did
day, if you can say, if I
Mhm.
died tomorrow, am I okay? Did I lead a fulfilling life? If you can say, yeah, I'm okay with that, then you're doing it right.
Yeah, yeah. That makes me wonder, Casey, about the flourishing, the concept of flourishing. How do you relate to that idea of flourishing? You mentioned fulfilling. I'm curious about those two things.
Eudaimonia. Yeah. Well, it's
Hmm.
about, like, well, Epictetus says it's not what happens or the events, it's our judgments about them. And that plays a huge role in that. So, in terms of flourishing, it's not about the musts. It's about being cognitively flexible. Can you adapt?
Mm,
And if you can adapt well, then it leads to eudaimonia. It's like amor fati, love your fate. And it's not even, you don't have to love the fate necessarily, but it's about acceptance.
mm-hmm.
If you are where you are, and if you can
Yeah,
accept that, then you can get to the next thing. It can lead to flourishing, but you
yeah,
cannot fight against the things that you can't control. In fact, that's the number one thing that causes the most anxiety in our lives.
yeah. Yeah, I've
I believe.
definitely experienced that. And that was one of the things that really drew me to Stoicism because I sort of had a mindset previously that somehow I either could or should control all these things.
Mhm.
Even if I couldn't, I should. And so I felt like an immense guilt or sense of like kind of over responsibility, like, oh, I should be able to somehow manage all of that. And especially with my kids when they were young, like, oh, I should be able to manage, everything for them and about
Yeah.
them so that they can have this great life and they can flourish in their way. But that my understanding of that was not very accurate to the world because it was sort of somehow I was responsible for creating, a perfect world for them and a perfect
Yeah.
life for them, which just is not, it's not realistic. I mean,
It's not
so
ideal. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So it became like, for me, that was a struggle. And that's part of why I found Stoicism so interesting. And then also I realized the goals were different. Like the goal is about developing your character and, aiming towards virtue, not, competing with the family next door or the other kid at school or, all these other things that one gets sucked into, especially
Yes.
in like modern American
There's
child
so
rearing
many
these
yes.
days.
There's so many externals and quote standards of perfection that would make
Yes.
you feel so bad as a parent. Like the narrative out there is just so, I said on the last episode of the podcast that I did with Scott Waltman, who's my co-author on The Rescuer Trap. I said something like, "Yeah, my kid watches TV. Yeah, my kid has a tablet. Say something. Do it." You My kid can count to 10 and he's 2. So
Right, right, right. I know. No, it's just like the basic mode of people out there when it comes to especially mothers, but parents in general, but especially mothers, I would say, is judgment. And, you're not doing this right. You should do that. And you didn't do that for your kids. And then they're going to be failures. I mean, the whole thing is just so messed up and so stressful. And so that's one of the reasons I adopted Stoicism as kind of a
yeah,
core
because
life
it's all from
philosophy. And
people
also
that know
for me.
nothing about it. And don't get me
Yeah.
started on breastfeeding.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole topic. We should have a separate episode.
my God,
That's a whole
seriously.
other thing. Yeah, it's wild what you encounter out there. But you mentioned something I want to go back to, which is adopt a sage. I love this concept. I'd love to hear more. Have you adopted a sage? And would you be willing to share, if so, who that is and who do you
Several
look up
throughout
to?
my
Oh,
life.
okay.
Uh, but one in particular, and I married him.
That's great. That's very convenient.
It is
But
convenient. It is
tell
convenient.
me more.
Um, so it's interesting. So it, like, of course, we know I write a lot about, codependency, and I have a history of being a fixer. I won't want to change someone into the idealized version of who I think they should be. And they're also people that I perceive as, needing my help. I finally met someone with monumental, intrinsic value and worth, and that didn't need me. So I thought, well, A, I want to be like that. And B, you know, like, I felt like simple things um, that he would do for me, like the things that you do in a relationship. I felt like I was being catered to. I was like, no, this is just how it works. This is how a healthy relationship works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for those who are listening, could you share who your husband is?
Yes, my husband is Donald Robertson. You may
Yeah,
have heard of him.
you may have heard of him. Yeah. In fact, he was on this podcast and he's, I got a chance to meet him in person in Athens. It was great. He's always got so many interesting insights. So I definitely could see that he would be a great sage to adopt.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
many ideas, of course, in relationship. It's a whole other ball game. Actually, my husband will be one of my podcast guests coming up because he he has some things to share too. And it's always interesting. When we first started dating many years ago, we said we should have a radio show together because we had different views, but we always had like an interesting conversation about them. So how is, I mean, I don't know if you're willing to share more, but like how is it, when you have that kind of, you know, maybe sage like person in your life?
It's wonderful. It's good. It also, I guess I would say, it gives you something to. I don't want to say strive for. Just it's constant reminders of. Gosh, I can't even really put it into words. Um, that life does flow well when you're flexible to change, and my husband's really good about that. Like things that I
Mm.
think I catastrophize and think that I
Mhm, mhm.
catastrophize about, he can instantly diffuse. He's like, "That's nothing. It is nothing," as Epictetus would say. But I remember I saw his. I think it was 2018 Stoicon, and he said something that um really resonated with me, and it was about Cato the Younger, and he was going into a battle, to oppose Caesar. We're opposing a dictatorship, and they said, "Oh, you should go see the oracle about this battle that's coming up." And he said, "It doesn't matter if the oracle says we win or lose. The point is that I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to fight Caesar no matter what." And I was like, "Wow, that's so." It at the end of the day, it is striving towards virtue. It is um, doing the right thing no matter the outcome. And actually, that's why my son's name is Hector, because he knew if he went up against a half god, he knew if he went up against Achilles, he was going to lose. But he's doing it because I have to fight for my city. I have to do what's right. And Hector means steadfast. So you're steadfast. You're always got your eye on virtue.
It's amazing. I did not know that. I mean, of course, the character, has a lot of like resonance in our culture, but I did not know about the meaning of the name. That's really cool.
Yep. Back where I come from in North America, everyone thinks he's Hispanic. Like, is he Mexican?
Right. That's so
Other
interesting.
Hector,
Yeah.
Greek Hector.
Right. Different, yeah, cultural differences there. But that's so cool. I love what you're saying. And there's a lot of people in the Stoic community I aspire to learn from and be more like. And for me, Stoicism is actually quite aspirational because it's not my, I would say, natural persona. But in some ways it is. It's just that I think we have so many struggles and challenges. I mean, I touched on one earlier about being a parent, but just everything else. There's always something that we're trying to overcome, and having that sage in one's life is amazing. And I was wondering if you could delve more into some of the work you've done as a writer and editor. And I know you worked with Donald on one of his books, Verissimus, right? The Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, and this is a cool book that has the comic style illustrations. And I know you've worked on kind of the editing, writing side, and then also you've worked on these other books. I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit about, what these projects have been like for you and what you learned from them.
So what I do is content editing. So I help a reader sort of expand upon their voice. I make sure that the message lands the way it's supposed to, it's interpreted the way it's supposed to be interpreted. But with Verissimus in particular, I remember because I've had, gosh, over 9, maybe 10 years in the indie comic industry where I was doing editing at the time and also
Very
writing.
cool.
But um, I had emailed him. I'm like, oh, I need to be a part of this project after I had listened to How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And I told him about my expertise. And I didn't even expect an email back, to be honest with you. And he emailed back and he said, I have a few pages that I think they're supposed to be scary and it's really not landing well. And I was working in horror and sci-fi at the time.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was pages where Hadrian is going mad and he's having a nightmare. And I can see everything is on one page. And so you got this, scary illustration, his dream. And then he wakes up in a dimly lit room with, a guard next to him going like, oh, was it really all a dream? I'm like, well, that's not scary. What's the scariest thing post nightmare? It's being in the dark, being in isolation. And I'm like, no, cut that. And I'm like, I'm going to zero in on his face. He wakes up with a nosebleed. I'm like, I want to see like the intensity in his eyes. I want to see them bloodshot. I want to see nose. I want to see him freaking out in the dark. And he was like, okay, you're hired.
That
So
does sound amazing.
yeah, there's a Cassius sets a tower of people on fire, and it's if you really like that panel of that guy screaming out to his god, well, that was me. Um,
Wow. Wow.
but anyway, that got me introduced to Tim LeBon, who was not working on a comic book, but he was working on 365 Ways to Be More Stoic. And he really helped me carve my niche, whether he knows it or not. He gave me a huge opportunity to find out who I could be in this arena. And I think I learned more about myself than anything else. I was
Mm,
doing, content editing for him. So I wound up contributing some original content, which is why my name's listed on the front of the book.
yeah.
And it all started with a joke I added in passing. Um, I don't think it even made it into the book, to be honest. That entry, um, but it was something about being a superhero, and I said, "Just be mindful that shooting webs is frowned upon in the office." Now, it's not a knee slapper, but it's enough to get a smile. It is lighthearted,
Right. Yeah.
and it was a little bit of a risk. And he commented on the document. He said, "Yes, more jokes, please."
Ah.
So not only as an editor was I helping him expand upon his message, I became sort of his hype man and joke writer. Oh, showed me that I could be myself and be successful in writing about Stoicism, CBT, and be my tongue-in-cheek self. Well, it's making Stoicism that much more accessible for the everyday person, which I find really rewarding.
Yeah, you found a voice there and you were able to bring your own personality into it, which I think is really critical. Because I think many people think of philosophy as this very distant thing that's just very, very academic and very kind of scary because it's so hard and it's so esoteric and it's so, this and that. And I think what's so cool about modern Stoicism is bringing it down, as Socrates said, like bring philosophy, or they said about Plato said about Socrates, bring I think philosophy to down to earth,
Hmm.
and make it practical, and so that we could actually think about how it affects our everyday lives. Which when I was in school, that was not philosophy, and it was so much distant. But now I feel like there's this really great way that folks are bringing it to life with their own personalities, with their own lives, with their own struggles. So I applaud what you did there, and I would really love to hear more about the Rescuer Trap. Would you be willing to share a little bit about that book? And I'm a people pleaser in recovery myself, trying to work on it. And so would love to just hear what kind of the book's about and how Stoicism is involved.
Yeah. So, um, pleasing people is okay. And, going the distance for people is okay. And being a high achiever is okay. It's all okay. When is it not okay? When it becomes a measure of your self worth. And that is how it is for a lot of people. And more people than than they would like to admit. I'm sorry, I have to turn up the brightness.
No worries.
And the the issue is that there's a stigma surrounding labels like, codependent, or people pleaser. And without that transparency, I think that people just go on living this way. And what they're doing is they're becoming a slave to fate. They're living life for
Mm,
other people. And we're not, again, it's about eudaimonia. That's not fulfilling. Memento mori, one day you're going to die. And according to hospice nurses, the number one deathbed regret is that I lived my life for other people.
mm,
So you're trying to rescue people not only from uh, their emotions, but you're trying to rescue them from your their perception of you. You're trying to control the narrative, and you can't. You can't. So where stoicism comes in is it has when you are in a relationship in which you are. This is just for example, codependent on somebody else. Um, then that's a bid for control. When you're trying to fix somebody, that's a bid for control. When you're people pleasing, that's a bid for control. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. So it's also, if it becomes a measure of your self worth, then there is no intrinsic value. So what we're trying to show, Stoicism is all about autonomy
yes.
and letting go of the things you can't control. So between that and CBT sort of being the practical tools broken down from this ancient philosophy, both Scott and I are recovered rescuers, and this is our mass rescue. This is our final one.
Yeah.
This book, The Rescuer Trap, because what happens is that it is a trap. Because I was speaking to Dr. Jeff Perron, which the philosophy of happiness
Mm,
on Substack is a very popular column. I really enjoy it. Um, and he talks about, leaving, doing the cut and run, sort of saying, oh, well, I'm done with this shit. And then I'm going on to the next relationship. We become a relationship hopper because you can't, sit with the feeling uncomfortability, somebody not
yeah.
measuring your self worth.
Yeah.
And you're not done with it. You've got the same exact lens. And then you go repeating the same pattern, the same pattern, the same pattern. And when I finally went to therapy, that's the first question I asked.
Mm,
Why does every relationship end up the same? Well, because it's the same equation over and over and over. And that was the turning point for me. And I feel like, um, gosh, decades of these sorts of long-term relationships that wound up the same. I don't want that for someone else. So this is sort
yeah.
of my redemption arc, the rescuer trap.
That's so great. I think that this is something that people will benefit from hearing, and I am excited to read, honestly. And this term kind of rescuer, is that a term that's used in psychology?
Yes. The
Okay.
rescuer role is how they refer to it. And it's made
Okay.
up of, several schemas. It could come from anywhere. It'd be an approval seeking schema. It could be a shame driven schema. everyone's got different reasons for having arrived into this role. But when it becomes a role, it's more about fulfilling the role. You feel like your life, you feel like that's going to bring me fulfillment. And in the end, it doesn't. You
Yeah.
bankrupt your values
Yeah.
to sort of
Yeah.
become a chameleon to somebody else's life.
Yeah. I mean, I see this everywhere. I also see it in my work too. And I think it becomes sort of enablement sometimes too, which is not great because it's
Because
not good for the other person. Because then that person is not able to have independent agency and kind of do what they need to do to
thank
improve
you.
themselves and to
Mhm.
actually, do their job, for example. And it's just not healthy in any way, shape, or form. Well, I'm curious about how this interacts with your parenting and your interest in parenting as being a parent yourself. I, of course, have this very strong interest in parenting. I've thought about it a lot. I'm just very curious of, uh, you know, how can we bring that rescuer trap thinking to parenting? Any thoughts on that just spring to
Ah,
mind?
interesting. That's that's a very interesting question. I think that, well, first of all, uh, the sage mom doesn't exist. It's kind of this thing we built up in our minds, and when we become a rescuer, it's sort of like we are chasing the idealized, role, the idealized environment, the idealized how things are supposed to go. It's not possible with motherhood. It's simply not possible. Expect the unexpected. So my parenting philosophy has sort of become stay engaged, but keep it simple.
Mm.
Always be engaged with your kid, but you got to bend when the wind blows.
I love that. I think that's really wise. And little Hector, I've seen his photos and video. Oh, he's so cute.
Thank
And
you.
he's just a little guy. My parenting has evolved because my kids got older and, they became teens and stuff. And I think that it's really important when you have teens and older kids because you do have to allow them to go out there, try things and maybe fail or maybe just do something. You're not going to rescue them from everything. Even
Right.
bringing them their homework at school is something that, my husband and I had a small disagreement on. Like, I was like, I do not think we should drive their homework to school if they forgot it that day. If they can't, they'll have a late grade. But on the other hand, we also want to help your kid. Okay. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it's
So
a
it's
balancing
hard.
act. But there
Yeah,
there
it's a balancing act. Exactly.
yes, yeah, and that reminded me of stoic interconnectedness.
Hmm.
Their struggles and joys are not a reflection of our self-worth. It helps them teach compassion and responsibility to others and recognizing that their actions ripple outward and affects the whole family and in a wider community.
Absolutely. Have you learned lessons from your parenting that you apply to your stoicism or vice versa?
Um, yes, I think I'm reminded to slow down. I
Mm,
won't get this time again. So, you know, memento mori. Like, why would I spend all this time, this brief time? I say all this time, but brief time looking back, being so hard on myself?
I think that's really smart. It's really hard in practice, at least for some of us who are instinctively hard on ourselves. But I think that's a good thought.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and I was curious about kind of your life philosophy and um, your own approach to your life. One of the things I like about thinking about practical philosophy and stoicism is it can help us through hard times. And I was wondering, is there anything you find that helps you keep going when times are
my son, of course. But I think time projection is a really good one, which is something that we do in CBT. Remembering that the short term struggles are for the greater good of the long term.
hard?
And my values sort of shifted when I became a parent as well. I think that's just
Mm,
natural. It's more about him than anything else, and I'm okay with that. I used to, I'm a high achieving, out for glory person, and now it's become even more like that's okay so long as my son's happy.
yeah, yeah. Does that feel kind of odd to you? Because it really is a shift.
Yet I thought it would feel odd. Like if you had told
Mhm.
me in theory
Mhm.
before it happened, I would just say, "Oh, that sounds awful." Like
Right.
it would make me feel like you've taken a part of my identity, but no, it's not. He's a part of my identity. He's this is my life.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that happens when you're a parent and you see your child and you just want all good things for them. You want joy for them, and it's your joy too when they experience that. For me, looking at, I have a kid who's already in college now. It's challenging because, like, I want to still see all the things that make her happy. And, of course, I want to spend time with
It'll be
her,
so
but
hard. I'm not
it's
near that
it's
stage
hard.
yet, but gosh, I could only imagine.
It's hard. It's a challenge because also, like, you raise your kids and then they get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, this person is awesome, and we can have these conversations, and wow, it's like we're kind of friends now, and then they leave. So, but
Yeah,
you still stay in touch. If you have a good relationship, you still have a relationship, of course, and that they'll always be your child, and that's so.
it's hard to not see them as an extra limb.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. And then, when that limb's gone, it's a little harder. But they're not really, knock wood, gone. But um curious if you have any other advice for folks. I know that, you've shared a number of things you've done, you've with your writing, you've done with your parenting, with your thinking about psychology, and your work, and your quest for the sage. I mean, I hope that my listeners are interested in developing their own life philosophy and their sense of purpose. Is there anything you'd like to kind of share on that score?
Yeah, I mean, I can't take credit for this saying, but it's been said before. Um, Keep in mind that you are so free that you can choose bondage. And I think we
Mm,
do that every day. We're a bondage to, we're a slave to our own, anxieties, in it, in what other people think, the narrative, and that's not how we were intended to live. Um, so remember that it's a choice every day. Now we can't, if we can't necessarily control our first initial response, but we can control our overall judgment.
yeah. What can we do to remind ourselves of that, like, regularly?
Um, every day. Um, what can we do to remind ourselves of that? I think it's being conscious. It's gonna feel exhausting
Mm,
at first. It's gonna feel
yes.
exhausting to be conscious of every impression.
Yes.
However, we must remember that all of these things are initial impressions and not necessarily the things that they represent, as Epictetus would say. It's
Yes.
easy to run away with them. So it's not to control the initial impressions or the way we react initially. It's about not getting swept up. So I think if we just have that sort of inner control over and over and over again to not get swept up in it, to really take the view from above and see this perspective from a higher plane, then I think it will become one swift cognitive motion after a.
Mm,
It's not simple,
yeah.
but you will if you really want to achieve that, you will.
It takes work and dedication
Mhm.
to have that level of awareness, but it can make an enormous difference. And that's something I strive for.
Yeah, I
I
think
think what you've just said is really profound.
Oh, thank you.
I love
Thank
it. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really great conversation, and I've
course,
appreciated getting
thank
to
you. This
learn
was fun.
about you. And I can't wait to read this book, The Rescuer Trap. I think it sounds really, really interesting.
Thank you. I can't
Um,
wait to read your the Stoic Mom book as well. And
yeah.
there's an interview that was just published today about Beyond Stoicism with you, Gregory and Maximo. And so check that out.
Yes.
Yes, at Plato's Academy Center, the
That's right.
Substack.
Oh, we didn't even touch on Plato's Academy. Do you want to say just a couple words about your work on that?
Oh,
And thank you for publishing about our book and our
well, no
interview. Appreciate
problem.
that
And
so much.
on
Yeah.
Thursday, I don't know when this podcast is going to go out, but you'll find an excerpt from Beyond Stoicism published as well. So there's going to be two different things: the interview, and then the excerpt from the book. So be sure to check
Fantastic.
that out, guys. Plato's Academy
Yeah.
Center on the Substack. I run the newsletter. I'm also the director of communications, and we are a nonprofit based in Athens, Greece, and we promote philosophy as a way of life. For the everyday person. And so from, academics to um, those who are just, slice of life writers, we try to promote the authors, and we also have virtual events centered around a different theme. This last one we just did was hosted by myself and Dr. Scott Waltman, my co-author on The Rescuer Trap, and it was the philosophy of love and relationships. And this next one is going to be on anxiety, which I think a lot of people
Ooh.
will resonate with them. But admission is free. Donations are welcome, and donations go towards building a physical location at Plato's Academy Park.
I am very excited about that too, because I did get a chance to go there this past summer when Donald led a walk around the park and a philosophy talk. And I was present for one of those. And I was just like, it's really magical. And then, of course, you're in this park and you just see people, walking and strolling and have their dogs and kids just playing around on like ancient stones. And
Yeah, some of
you
them
really,
don't even know that Plato's buried there.
yeah. And it's definitely like a real slice of life. It's like, this is life. This is just people are just living their lives, but we can bring philosophy and just these ideas that help us live more fully, more consciously, like you said, more fulfilled, more aware. So that's really cool what you're doing with Plato's Academy. I am excited about that too. And we need to stay connected. And thanks for talking with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you. This was a joy. Thank you.